Senator Babet.
Thank you, Acting Deputy President. Now, I rise here today to speak about the recommendations by the Australian Law Reform Commission on religious discrimination. Now, these recommendations, they are an egregious attack on people of faith. That's what they are. And it must be rejected. All of their recommendations must be rejected by everyone here in this chamber. How dare the ALRC suggest that the state dictate to religious people which views on human sexuality are acceptable and which views are not acceptable? Who died and made the ALRC the Pope? How dare the ALRC encourage politicians to interfere in the staffing of religious organisations, dictating who they can and who they can't employ?
I don't care that you're a Christian. I don't care what the Bible says. I feel like it's a clown show trying to decipher what your little mythical book has to say about these very real political issues. I don't care if you're Christian. I don't care about your goddamn religion.
These recommendations, they represent a massive overreach by the state. But you know what? They're worse than that. They are a full frontal attack on human rights. If people are not free to follow their own conscience when it comes to sexuality and gender, then they are not free at all. And if people are not free to associate with those whom they share common values and ethics, then in what sense does freedom of association exist at all? It doesn't exist. If senators value freedom of religion and freedom of association, then they will agree with me that the ALRC report 142 must be condemned and rejected. Now, the Liberal Party's own statement of beliefs declares their support for, and I'll quote, the freedom of thought, worship, speech and association. Their statement of belief declares these things to be the most basic freedoms of parliamentary democracy, while the ALRC recommendations don't just undermine those most basic of freedoms, they crucify them. That's what they do. Now, if a Christian school cannot insist that its own staff are practising Christians, then in what sense does that school remain Christian? Would the Greens pre-select an SUV driving oil company executive as a candidate? Of course not. Don't be silly. Would the unions appoint a free market libertarian with a background in entrepreneurship as their shop steward? Nope, they wouldn't. Would the Australian Pride Network choose a heterosexual Pentecostal who insists that there are only two genders?
You are the gender traitor.
To work as their LGBTQIA plus -sign, divided by sign, exclamation mark, liaison manager,
etc., etc. I got it.
We all know the answer to that one. They would not. So riddle me this, okay? Why are religious organisations singled out for special treatment by the ALRC? It's not a trick question, and it does not require us in this place to spend hours talking about it. 1/3 of Australian families send their kids to religious schools because they value the ethos, ethics and values being taught. The ALRC report would make it illegal for religious schools to uphold their ethics and values. Their recommendations, if enacted, would neuter religious schools and deny a huge portion of the Australian community their preferred choice in education. It's wrong. It must be rejected. We all have a set of beliefs in this chamber, a way in which we see the world. When the government starts insisting that they can frame people's worldview, especially on deeply held beliefs like sexuality, gender and marriage, then everyone is in danger.
We the people tell the government what to do. It doesn't tell us. We the people are the driver. The government is the car. And we decide where it should go and by what route and how fast.
Today it's the Christian worldview. Okay, fair enough, that is under attack. But it's an incredibly naive person who cheers the interference of government in Christian schooling just because they don't like Christians. Instead, you should be asking if the government can involve itself in the belief system of Christian organisations, who will be next? Where, if anywhere will the line between state-imposed belief and personal values be drawn. Now, if the ALRC's recommendations are not condemned, then we are green-lighting government to involve itself in anyone's worldview and in anyone's associations. I do not want to live in a world like that. I just don't. Join me in condemning and in rejecting the Australian Law Reforms Commission report, and in doing so, safeguard the rights of all Australians to belief and to freely associate as they choose.
Thank you, Senator Babet.